Yeah, okay. So Mario and I did meet yesterday, and we just kind of tried to review a lot of the notes that we took from the previous conversation and moving forward, and trying to think of how to organize. And I think our conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mario, we moved more towards how do we develop a planning tool, not necessarily a document, but just like a planning tool for an authentic performance task that a teacher might be able to use in conjunction with their students in a class. I think from the conversation that you and I, Kikai, had in talking about feedback and how this, whatever tool we're using to plan an authentic performance task really needs to be something that you can change over the course of the trimester if you to respond to students' input and to their need. So we came up with a few different ideas, uh, but my suggestion from yesterday was to really have a conversation around more so like what should a planning tool have built into it, like what types of questions um, should this tool answer? And I think that started helping me out in terms of saying, okay, how could this actually look, or how could this be used? So some of the questions that I put forth yesterday when Mario and I were meeting was, what it will want, just some of the basic ones. What is the essential question? What are the skills that students should be proficient in? What are content standards that students should be familiar with? How are students being assessed? What are the components of an authentic performance task, whether it's a general rubric or a specific skill or content rubric? What student input is considered in this authentic performance task? And what does a successful APT consist of, and how does that look? Just thinking very general type of questions that I think should be included in the tool.
Yeah, and then so yeah, I agree. I think that's where what we're talking about, that this is really more, it was sounding more like a planning tool to help teachers and to help us like navigate and figure out what students will be doing, what they're going to be learning, what the product will look like when they complete the summative assessment. And what I did finally, which I meant to do last week, is I've uploaded to the PD folder the video of our APT document review breakout session from last week that is now available. And I went through it and I took notes from that, because now I had a chance to see the video, and I took notes from teachers sharing their experiences, and some folks saying how they create a friendly student version of an APT handout. And then someone else saying certain components don't seem to be applicable, like you don't even use them anymore. And so I was trying to really like capture what teachers are saying about APTs. And so what I'll do, I'll put the notes in the chat box, but I do want to put these somewhere. And I'm thinking they might just go in the PD folder on that breakout session from last week, since this is notes on the video that was last week. And I guess that if you were to read it, it kind of almost works like a transcript, like I transcribed the conversation, but more in a notes kind of style. And I found, again, teachers approaching it from different directions. And let me close this here. But also to the point in which Sonia and Tisol kind of chimed in, because I think Brett asked the question about like are there other stakeholders who look at these documents and whatnot. And pretty much like Tonya said, well, look, for sure, students need to know what kind of content standards they'll be measured against, the culture competencies, an overview of the content and the goals, objectives for the project. But she also said that if that info is captured somewhere else, that's fine. And that kind of, to me, like says, well, then if a course syllabus, and this is something I was telling Anthony, I was like, well, syllabus tells you everything about the class, like what it's about, what kids will be learning, whatever content standards you're going to be meeting. And when I look at teachers' course documents, I read the class syllabus, because that tells me everything that they're going to do for that one trimester. So so then I thought, well, then I guess that probably tells me that, you know, to agree with Anthony, that it's not exactly a document as a product that tells students what to do, but it's a planning document that helps teachers to figure out what they want to do. So in the notes, feel free to read through it or feel free to copy and add that to your drive, but I'll make it available. But the part that I boldface at the bottom of the notes is at the bottom, that kind of told me that basically, you know, all this info is elsewhere, and elsewhere being the syllabus, and probably APTs as a handout, maybe something that potentially may not be like something students don't need to know what to do, but I guess in terms of submissions to the chairs or principals, like it seems like that could be probably something that may not be as necessary as a syllabus. But yeah, that's so yeah, it's a planning document. And poor Anthony, I'm like, I'm working on these different ideas, and I share with them a really horrible one on the Google Forms as I was trying to visualize as a teacher what are my steps when I complete an APT for a class, and then he presented one with a slideshow that's like far better, but at the same time, like us trying to understand like the approach for these handouts that we're supposed to be doing. But for me, it just seems that the syllabus is like really like the what tells you and anybody else who wants to know what's the kind of learning that's going to happen in classes.
I was going to say, I like the idea of a planning document, just because it I think it was Joey who said something about it's important to make sure that teachers do have a plan for something, because he witnessed a teacher who actually didn't plan for anything, and it was horrible for the students. So I think it's very important to just have a planning document. I'm just weary of having to, I just don't want people to be like, oh, it's a planning, or do a planning document or a planning tool, and then plus something else. And, you know, we don't want to add something extra, because it's already so much paperwork.
Right.
But I love the idea of some kind of planning document or planning tool. I also like the idea of, you brought up, sorry, I made a mind blank because they're doing work outside.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I'll think of it and I'll say it.
Yeah, and if it's a planning doc, yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
Because I was gonna say that all teachers, we always create a document to give to our students anyway, because we tell them, you know, we want to lay out the final or lay out like, oh, this is your project. So we create that document anyway. So I think it will give some sovereignty to teachers to be able to still say freely, create your own document that you would normally do, that, you know, it's not like it has to be a certain format, because that kind of kills our sovereignty, kills our creativity when it has to be a certain format. So I think we all create that anyway. So I think it'll be good for us to still be able to have that document that we give to our students that's student friendly. I'm just advocating for not extra on top of extra, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think, you know, when Mario and I were having that conversation yesterday, it really came down to, okay, just as you mentioned, the syllabus covers a lot of this stuff. And even within the syllabus, I've always turned in the syllabus, and at the end of technically the syllabus, I put it as one document. I'll put the APT document that they've given me, and that's what I turned in. Now, if we're really, you know, stepping back and considering the purpose of the authentic performance task and what role a teacher plays in that, when I think of it, there's really two things going on, and this is just kind of the way I've always tried to understand it, where there is the explanatory document, and that can be either a one-page, you know, like how I used to do that back in the day, was just a one-page document that kind of explained to students what they were being asked to do. Now a lot of people do it on Schoology. You may even include some sort of like presentation that you give to your class, and you can also record it now and upload it to Schoology so that students have many different ways of getting the explanation, right? Then there's the actual planning or the process document that I have in my mind that I use to kind of think of what does this authentic performance task actually look like? And I ask myself all those questions that I mentioned earlier, right? How is this tied to my syllabus? What are the expectations for the student? What does it actually look like? And I think that for me, that's what I was thinking in terms of developing something that would help, either beginning instructors, first time teachers, or even us in trying to plan this out, where you start with a baseline or something that you kind of have, and you develop that over the course of the trimester as you work with your students. And then this is what you all should be able to do by the end of this course as an authentic performance task. And that can take many different, as we talked last time, that can take many different shapes and forms in terms of showcasing your now hopefully, better ability of a particular skill set, or of, understanding of certain content, or combination of both. And so I think when I was trying to develop something that might support that, that's where Mario and I had the conversation of an actual planning tool that could be used potentially.
But it's a planning tool that if the teacher needs like those scaffolding steps, so I think at some point, like I feel after time and years of teaching, you more or less know, like, for example, your instructional hour breakdown for what to do in your class.
Mm-hmm.
And when you design courses, something similar happens where you know what to cover, what to teach, because you've done it so many times. And I think that's where the planning is there as an assistant, probably for the teacher that needs that, but not for something that adds more paperwork, because I think, that's I think what I would like for teachers to avoid. And I looked at your slideshow, Anthony. Would you be okay to share that and walk us through?
Yeah, not a problem at all. So,
pretty cool. And thanks,
just,
Kikai. You shared that thing with us too. Awesome.
Yeah, no, I saw that Kikai. I modeled mine after yours. So.
I just put that there just because I do the same thing you said in terms of putting it all in one document, just so it won't be like an email of like 10 documents. You know?
Yeah, just like this, exactly how you have it. Yeah, that's exactly how it is.
And also bear in mind that this is happening and this conversation only because, there's the LP, the ACE LP manual is currently trying to go through like a revival or a revision. So it's part of looking at documents that are the most active for teachers, the ones we use every year, and looking at what can be done to make changes, if at all, and maybe nothing really happens in the end.
And I think one thing to consider as well when Anthony was talking is to consider the audience that this is going to. So I think that the thing that probably brought me the most frustration with completing the APT document was that I would complete it for my administrators, but it wasn't for my students, even though it was kind of packaged as if it was for your students. Of course, the planning and the detail and what I do, that's for my students, but the document itself was just for submission. And I think that even with the new revision of this is to keep in mind, who are we doing this for? Mm-hmm. And like what is the purpose that we want to get out of it? So if it's a planning tool, that's awesome, because it's going to be for our growth. It's going to be for our students to have like an amazing, thoughtful, well planned out APT. It was something else. I really liked the document you shared when you were presenting the CAP for your school site, and it was like an ongoing living document. It was just like this long thing. It's cool because if you're a reflective educator, when you look back at the year, you can see, oh, this is where this changed. This is where, I went this, like you can see that running document, because sometimes you might start an idea. I've planned APTs where I'm like, I'm gonna do this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it went completely left. Mm-hmm. But because you have that running document, you can see, oh wow, this is where students said this, and I went this way. So you can kind of see that guidance. You can see like your growth visually in that living document. I think that's a good idea. But something like that, it's like, okay, well, how can I turn something like that in that's actually useful to me as an educator, but might not be useful to the person that's looking at it to say, check, she did it. You know what I mean? So I think that's the duality that I kind of go with. Like, my students are 100%. That's what I'm like, that's what I'm here for. But then it's like, you have this like things that are required and must be submitted and turned in by this date, that I also want to make sure I always submit everything on time, but I also want to make sure that I give it that it has a meaning. It means if it can mean as much to me as it does for what I do for my students. I don't know how to phrase that, but I want it to be meaningful, so I won't feel like I'm just like blah, submit, you know?
Yeah,
That does make a lot of sense to me.
I think looking at the notes, and I believe it's what you're referring to, is that the APT, when it was created and through its revisions years ago, was believed to have needed certain compliance things that was thought that it had to be there for WASP purposes, for other auditors purposes, but really the syllabus does that for the teachers for the school. So when you were asking like, well, who's the audience for the APT, you know, that's where we begin to think, well, it must be stakeholders and other people who want to know what we're doing. But when it comes to students, they want to know what I got to do and what are my steps, how many credits do I get for this project, you know, like a more student friendly version. But yeah, I remember in the video, it was mentioned that there's compliance things that they thought needed to be there on APT that I think tells me, okay, then it doesn't got to be there anymore, or the APT just repeats the compliance things already on the syllabus that we turn in to our.
That makes me think
leadership.
about the presentation we had in our science PD this year was think about your why, right? It was like, what's the why behind why we're doing this?
Mhm.
So I think that would be an important question to make sure we know, like, I think, yeah, just to make sure we kind of just, like, you might have your why and you might say what your why is, but then open that up some more and go deeper and go deeper to find your ultimate real why. Why are we doing this? You know, and I think it kind of goes to some of those questions that you brought up in terms of like art, you know, like what competencies, how will this look when it's successful? Like some of those whys. And I think that would probably be what's important to have there.
Yeah, so I mean, I can share kind of what Mario and I in our conversations were able to take away and then put into some sort of very, very, very rough. It could be organized many ways, but something that you could potentially continue to use as a teacher during the course of a unit. So this is just something that I was able, based on my conversation with Mario yesterday, Mario put together a tool using, I believe it was like
It was Google Forms.
Google Forms. And then I was like, okay, so based on this, how could somebody use this in like an iterative process over the course of a unit, right? So I was like, all right, if I'm going to come in as a teacher, right, and I'm going to talk to students about, okay, this course, what we're working towards in this course is an authentic performance test. Let's begin that discussion early on in the term, have students understand what is one of the long-term goals of this course. And as you develop that with your students, right, you can start by putting down some things that you kind of already know what you're going to go with at the beginning, right? The class, essential question, number of credits, and then anything else here. I didn't know what else to put. So I just kind of left it like that, but there's some basic things from the class. Maybe you start with a general description of the project, right? It doesn't have to get into too much details, but this is what
that last part could be like the competencies.
Yeah. So you could organize them anyway. So I just try to kind of put together slides that I felt were allowed you to answer certain questions that you might ask, right? So, you know, description of project, what are some skills that students should be proficient in, right? So you can kind of develop this, and this can work well with your syllabus before you plan your class. What are some of the content standards that students will be familiar with or should be? How are students being assessed, right? Just in terms of the APT. What will a successful APT consist of? And you can modify this, of course. These are some options, right? So as you go through the course, maybe you say, okay, this is one potential option to show as an authentic performance test. Maybe this is another option. Maybe the students want to develop their own options, right? So what would you do if you had the choice of your own APT? And along with this, there can be descriptions. Maybe you have a general rubric that you developed with students or by yourself over the course of the units. And then, you know, just for teachers, purpose of planning week by week, you know, what content did you cover? Did you actually get to cover? What were some skills that students practice? And this last one is just, it's blank. It's just, I didn't delete it. But something like this, I felt, all right, this may be a good tool that you could reflect on a weekly basis that could be shared with students in their class page, like in their Schoology page, and you can continue to develop. So there's many ways you could go with this. It was just the first kind of draft and attempt at this.
And I can see the way this would benefit a teacher in planning out the course as it goes forward. Because again, you might have an APT idea back in late August, early September. By the time the midterm comes around, you realize, oh, like I said, we went a different direction. So then you have to kind of almost like move backwards and replan. But in this kind of what looks to be like a planning tool, a teacher could, let's see, go, if you don't mind, Anthony, go to slide 6, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was 7. But there is one that I can see a teacher can document, okay, we covered this part so far, we covered this part in week 2 or week 3, so that it gives the teacher a map of the territory of learning that's been going on, in order to use that to show the teacher, okay, based on the evidence that I have here in this planning tool that's showing me what we've done so far, I think the APT will be this instead, which can be done probably here, but a visual could be helpful for some teachers. And I think that's what came to mind where, that's what it was, slide number 8, where a teacher can then decide, okay, we covered these components. We didn't get to this, but based on what we did cover, these are the options I can offer students. But it serves as a visual graphic organizer for teachers that could help them out to map out what the project will look like. And I feel that's where it comes back to, well, then it's a planning process, not so much like a description of the project.
Yeah. And that was the 2 different things, right? The explanatory portion of it and then the planning process of it. Now, again, I don't think that, I think when I was putting this together, I wasn't like, I don't think it should be mandatory for teachers just because that's just one more thing for somebody to do. Right. But I think when I was putting this together, I was like, I would love to try this out in T1 and kind of see how this goes and just learn from the process of using some sort of tool that gets developed, right? Now, if it comes back to, we still have to submit a specific document for admin purposes, I still think the simplified versions that Mario, you were able to put together make it a little bit easier, just kind of condense it.
Hopefully.
if that's all captured already in the syllabus, I don't know if it's necessary to have 2 documents or what Kikai just shared, just regardless, still submit that full document. And I think that's a question that we can ask.
Yeah. If let's say you and I try this out for one of our classes, get some kind of baseline info and data, how this works, so that come winter PD, we have something to kind of show teachers or for us to kind of meet and share our results, because it will be helpful to just see what that happens. And I agree, it's just something for the teacher to use, not to be submitted to leadership, because that's more documents. And again, I think it's not, the purpose of this is just to really help to execute those ideas.
You know, I think manner. if it, you don't have to submit it per se, but if you want to share it with somebody and they can go ahead and follow your progress as well. Because I think the other part of this is, when I was thinking of it, I really do want to be more intentional with something that Kikai and I, or Kikai had mentioned in the last conversation, which is, you know, where does the feedback come in? How do you provide that? So not only getting feedback from students or allowing for student input when you're developing the authentic performance task, but in addition to that, with your department chair, right? Or with whoever is going to be kind of taking a look at whatever APT it is, this can also help in that iterative approach where now you're getting feedback and you can actually use, you know, various tools. You can use the notes to add ideas and so forth. So curious to see.
Yeah, I completely agree in terms of what you guys just said. I think it's important to know like what's the purpose of submitting it, or if we are I know with both of you guys probably heard me talk about decolonizing things a lot all the time.
Mhm.
I think just kind of even decolonize an idea of like when we submit something is to kind of get that check mark, like it's done. But
Mhm.
ultimately for us to grow is just to get that feedback, you know, like if we get feedback, it doesn't have to be from someone that's like leadership. It can also be from one of our peers.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's good to get it from someone who's outside of my math content, because that person might just be looking at just math, whereas someone like one of my coworkers, like say Bernardo or Rico, someone else looked at it, they can see it through other eyes. And I think it'd be good to just, if there was like, oh, did you get feedback from one of your colleagues? Yes, I did. And this is, because those things help, you know? So I think that if we try to think about different ways of how do we still get that growth that we essentially want without it being like, did you submit it to the big person in charge? You know, like how do we empower ourselves to say, I got something really useful from the person next door to me in my classroom, you know, the classroom next door to me. So I think that's just important to think about and give value to some of our colleagues that we have as well in their opinions, if possible. But I like this idea. It reminds me of just a regular unit plan, which is something similar to what I do already when I'm planning whatever course I'm going to teach. I think about what the APT is going to be, which content areas I want to cover. The only thing that I would get stuck on would be the part where it had a week. I would probably make that more chunky, just because if you do share that with students might see week 1, week 2, week 3, and they might say, we didn't get to this. But we know while we're teaching in a class, you have like big ideas, and there might be some times where I'm like, you know, we didn't get to this part, but I still know how to teach the next part with being able to skip over that part I didn't cover. But if someone from the outside is looking in, they'll say, oh, we didn't get to that part, we're behind. And they might think something is wrong, even though the course could still go on successfully, because as a teacher, we know what part you can, you know, you can say, I can drop this, but I can still cover this. And it'll still make sense. So I'll just say maybe kind of big picture that, just because when people see things that are chronological, they'll think they're behind or it'll be a deficit somewhere. But
yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So yeah, in terms of
just the wording of that, because it could still be like chunky was when I say like, oh, like say for example, if I'm going to do like something on congruence in geometry, like I would know like this big topic, this big topic, this big topic, but it might be something in there like, okay, well, I might not talk about transformations, you know, so it might be like chunky chunks. I don't know.
no, I know.
Topics?
So like
topics, yeah,
not as detailed or something.
I
got it. Okay.
Because we'll know like, oh, that'll take me about a week, oh, that'll take me about 3 days, that'll take me about like 6 days. But like for a student, they say week 1, week 2, we didn't do that for week 2, you know. That would be the only
what you're saying. Yeah, and I think that, you know, when I was putting this part together in particular, it really did have in mind this would be done like on a Friday, right, or at the end of the week or something, where you're like, all right, these are the things that we were able to kind of get through this week. So just as a tracking tool for me personally, I don't know if the students so much need to see this part. I mean, if it's helpful for them, they can. But I see what you're saying in terms of you may have something planned that you don't cover. That doesn't mean that students are any less more capable now than they were.
Yeah. And what I do actually, even summer school and all the time during distance learning, I always show my students a calendar, so we can see, like in the beginning of when I first, you know, you introduce yourself and all those things, I would show a calendar so they can see where we're going. And then like at the end of the week or when we get closer, I'll be like, all right, this many more days. And I'll show them what we covered to show them like, wow, you guys did so much. Like you guys learned those things. And so it's just my regular pacing calendar that I have. But maybe if it was this document, it could just be like a timeline. You know how you make like a timeline with just boxes? It can just be plain boxes, because it doesn't have to necessarily be like week 1, week 2, but it can just be boxes so that they'll still see their growth. Because when they see those rectangles on I can show you how it looks on my pacing calendar, but my pacing calendar, it's just like a calendar but with boxes, but the kids will be like, oh, we did all that. Like, yeah, we did that, you know? So
No, I see exactly. So let me play with this a little bit. So like if we have something like this, right? Where, and then this can, doesn't have to go in a chronological order or anything. It's just, these are the things that we've covered, or things that we've covered in this class, right? I think I got what you're saying. So for now, I can leave it like as topics covered or something like that.
But I can see like two things, like the benefit of a teacher doing this with students, as you're demonstrating, Kakai, in which week by week, maybe like on a Monday or Friday, you need to say, hey, students, so this week we covered these topics, and it's like documented for them to see, whether it's a timeline or however that's organized. And then week 2 comes around, week 3 comes around, and then they begin to see the path that they've been on so far. And that's where I believe, I forget, it might have been Sir, he mentioned like the liberation aspect of an APT, where here, if students are planning with the teacher or they're seeing the progress, that they can then decide, hey, what kind of project do you think we should do based on what we've covered in class?
Mhm.
With the teacher probably having like 1 or 2 ideas already ready to offer, but that it gives students some form of agency and voice to say, well, mister, we've covered poets about from the Black Panther movement. Can we do poetry? Sweet. You want that to be your project? And that's like the authenticity part, because they're making it real for themselves. I wonder if in the science class, something like that, or in math class could happen. But that's where I can see the planning process of this document can help for students to see, and maybe even like try to sort of design or choose a topic. I can also see the benefit that a teacher can receive feedback from another teacher outside the discipline in a critical friends kind of way, where you have this shared time with the teacher who is science, and they give you feedback on your APT that is not a science class, but it's helpful to get the outside perspective to see how it's interpreted. And that's, to me, like a critical friends kind of approach feedback.
Yeah, I definitely do like that. I think that, because a lot of courses have this like this linear type of format or whatnot, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to teach a lot of topics, because a lot of them build on each other, or you may learn something first and then that makes it easier for you to learn something else, or vice versa. You learn you may learn the greater picture and then you kind of feel it. Like, I always thought of it like I remember growing up and like drawing. I was never good at drawing or coloring. My sister was really good at coloring, and she would always, if it was like a coloring book or something, she'd always like outline everything and then like shade in the details. So in teaching, a lot of times that may be easier, where you teach the greater picture and then you just like fill in the details. So that I think can potentially help in terms of thinking of this planning document. That's serious, but yeah. Well, I didn't know. Just
Maybe
say
I was gonna say, like, that's the best way to color. I think
Yeah.
those are both really great ideas. And one thing I really love about it is it empowers the student to take ownership of their own learning, and their way of showing that they understand. Because again, we have this colonized idea of saying, if a kid does this, if a kid earns this much, then perfect, you pass. So I think it gives that ownership to that student in their own creative way of showing, I do understand this, and let me show you how I understand it. And I think the big one of the other big movements or things you see is this a lot of educators, I call it educator Twitter. You look at other teachers' Twitters, and it's talking about choice boards, and having students have choice on how they complete those assignments. And I think that's just a really good idea, because it allows students to have that. And another thing that I like about it is that sometimes people think of teachers as like, being a teacher, you're in control. It's a way of taking that control out of that.
Yeah.
That control aspect out of it, and allowing students to learn in their own way. So I support those things.
Cool. 323. I don't know if we arrived to anything that's definitive, to be honest, but I mean, there's a lot of great ideas shared, and next steps, I'm not sure. I'm sure maybe Anthony and I will probably meet up at some point and chat and see. And I'm sure Sonia will probably want some like a debrief on
I'm
what
gonna
took
share
place
this with
in
you as
call.
well, Kirkai.
All right, cool.
Okay.
And
But yeah, I don't know what
I mean, I
direction to
think
go
this
in.
is this is. I mean, I got a lot out of it. I think again, this was just really a first attempt at it. But if you all want to add anything to this or make any revision, please feel free. I'm definitely curious about trying this out over the course of T1 and even if it's just for one class or something, and just kind of see how that experience is, what issues may come up, challenges and things of that sort.
Yes, I'm gonna. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, you go.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm gonna try it out for planning my stuff for this semester. I'll still submit the other one as well, but I'll try that one out as well just to see like what my takeaways are as like how good I feel about it afterwards. I think one thing I'll say for you guys is just to bring up the idea of how fluid is that deadline in terms of, when, because if she gives extensions to people, then that means that deadline is not like a must. So I think it's just questioning like what's the point of that deadline? Because with that document, that's an ongoing thing and it might take a while. But as long as you see that we started it, then you can see the person is doing something and they're actively doing something. So I guess just question that part. I think for all of us, we also need to make sure that, I know like all of us actually work at the same site together. So we kind of, our documents are, I'm secure knowing all of our documents are good. And they're pretty much the same. But I guess it would be just making sure we have a universal understanding of how other people submit their syllabi. So just making sure that part does include all the things we say it includes, because it might for us, but we work at the same school, so we kind of use the same documents. So I'll say just shining up that part.
Because I know you're right, there's a general syllabus tool and APT tool. And if the purpose is just like for accountability, as was brought up in the last one, I can see how that might work. Now with more so with this document, it being more of a planning tool, but it can also serve as an accountability tool if that's kind of the purpose of it. Because if you share it to a principal or something like that, then they can see how this document is going to change over time, and your basic or your beginning, I guess, right, the beginning of this authentic performance task development. So I think that it's definitely something that we need to clarify, Mario. But I feel comfortable with, now going back to the team in our next meeting or whatnot, and kind of sharing what we've come up with and what we've gotten to now.
No, you're right. That thanks for saying that. That's probably the next direction, to just let in our next chair meeting, let the folks know what transpired today and share the slideshow you've created, but also that. But yeah, it was really to give not just clarity, but more insight to like the purpose of the document. And I was going to say that here at Company YouthBuild, we have terms so that we called units are like outside, they're called terms here, and each new term is a new class. So the classes that begin here in 2 weeks will run until about mid-October, and then term 2 will be new classes. So what I could do is use your document and try it off one of my classes, and that way I get feedback from students and then do a report back. Because and I'm so glad Kakai said this about having baseline data to like begin with. I feel like that's like something that we have to do if this is something that folks are interested in doing. But overall, like awesome documented, like it looks really nice. It just looks great, and then it's probably still like it might be the trend where documents are now in the form of Google Slides and maybe less on documents or Google Docs. So yeah, I don't know, anything else?
I was gonna say one more thing for both of you guys and the rest of the planning for this. Are you guys familiar with the tuning protocol or like consultancy protocols? So those, so I can put in the link for it, but like tuning protocol when I was with LAUSD, it would be more like if you have, because I was a facilitator, so I was out of classroom. for a while. So it's like if we had an idea or a presentation we we're going to create for a school site or a principal or something, we would create a document, and then you go through a tuning protocol. So you have some of your peers who kind of get around you and you show them what you're going to do. It's kind of like looking at your work, but it's a way where they kind of probe and kind of see, like, questioning you in a way that's still respectful, not just saying like, oh, this sucks and that's whack. You know, it's just a way to kind of tune what you're doing to make it better, which kind of is similar to how the tool, the document that we have that you just presented. And then consultancy is when you kind of need help with something and you're questioning something, and then other people from the outside can just kind of throw questions at you, not tearing you down, just throwing questions out like, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And then you kind of just listen to hear their conversations on it. But I can give you guys a link to it, but I think that would be a good, it's good to see it in practice, but it's also, you can look at the document though, and just, it kind of sounds similar to what this could be useful for. Is either tuning or consultancy protocol.
Yeah, that would be great. Just because the other part, Kikai, I think the last time we spoke, an idea we had, or something that came out of PD and I had brought up in the last meeting, is, you know, potentially having these shared planning spaces where, similar to what we did today, we can throw out a call and, hey, if anybody wants to meet up and just go over any ideas that they have or get feedback or anything like that, that'd be a cool space to do it moving forward. You know, maybe do it like once a month or whatever it is. If we were to use some sort of planning tool like this, that's also a space where that could occur. Like, hey, this is where we're at right now. Any feedback that we have, 5-10 minutes or whatever per person or something like that.
I think that's a good idea too, because it still satisfies some of those the reasons why we do this the APT document in the first place, which would be to show WASC growth and show that we're growing as educators and professional development and all those kinds of things. And imagine to document like, oh, my teachers meet at this time outside of work time, and just to help each other build up and be stronger for their students. I think that's still something I would like to read. If I was doing a walkthrough and I was reading it about a different school, I'd be like, wow, their school does this. That's amazing. So I think there's still positive things with that as well. So just no one should be planning on their own in that way and be like, because if I'm planning for my students, I'm the only one that's proving it, so that we can say, oh, it's good. But imagine when you say, oh, I had outside eyes who actually looked and also said, this was worthy of giving it to your students. So I think that's just a huge plus in terms of us growing as educators.
Yeah. And it serves to, I mean, we're technically one school, one giant school. So I think it's helpful, you know, even though we have different locations. So I don't know, that was one of the takeaways I got from the PD, is that it's extremely helpful, just like you said, to have people from other disciplines and different tool sets to really take a look at ideas that you have and give you feedback and make it even better. Cool. Well, thank you, Kikai, so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the info and COVID stuff too. So
yeah, and I guess for those who are viewing the video after 3:31 on Thursday, thanks. We're gonna say thank you ahead of time for watching the video.
Yeah. Keep an eye out for our upcoming podcast. We'll be releasing once a month.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording. Thanks so much, Kikai and Anthony. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
All right, bye, guys.
All right, bye.